Hello, everyone. Welcome to our January Community of Practice. I just want to say thanks for taking the time out today to join us. My name is Becky DeMattis. I'm an account manager here at Apprenti, and our Community of Practice this session, this quarter, I should say, is all about what's changing in the apprenticeship landscape, what we're seeing across the ecosystem, and what it really means for us in 2026. For those of you that are familiar with Apprenti, thanks. Thanks for coming around. Thanks for joining us. We hope to see you in our next quarterly community of practice. For those of you that may not be familiar with Apprenti, we are a USDOL intermediary. We are a national group model registered apprenticeship program. And we are here to expand registered apprenticeship, provide technical assistance around program development, education, and facilitate partnerships in the USDOL registered apprenticeship space. Our mission is Apprenti bridges the tech talent gaps by adapting the time-tested model of apprenticeship, excuse me, to meet evolving workforce needs. Apprenti is igniting a new paradigm to develop untapped talent and strengthen the tech ecosystem nationwide. I would like to let you know this is designed to be an interactive session to foster conversation, and I'd like to welcome our senior leadership members that are here today. Andrea Anderson is our Senior Director of Program Development and Education. Kyle McAllis, our Senior Director of Program Operations, and Steve King, our Senior Director of Business Development. Would like to just do a quick prompt in the chat. In one word, what comes to mind when you think about apprenticeship right now? So we'll give you a moment to think about that. Feel free to type your answers into the chat. Just in one word, what comes to mind when you think about apprenticeship right now?
We've got a bunch of folks dropping their answers in the poll too, so I'll share
perfect.
that. And
thank you.
Yeah, of course. You guys are filling it up really quickly, so I'll end the poll in about 15 seconds just to give everyone else some more time. All right. I just shared the results with you guys. I think you guys should be able to see them in the pop-up.
I just see that everybody answered, but I haven't seen the answers, which that's okay.
Oh, that is. Well, then I will just briefly share my screen with you all so you can see this fun word cloud I have.
Dan Weigel blames it on the snowstorm. Thanks, Dan.
Opportunity, changing, empowerment, revolutionary, life, learning.
Retention, that was a good one. Hope, like that one too. I like the word cloud. That's a fun little tool.
Yeah. I will give it back over to you.
Appreciate that, Emily. I'm going to go ahead and kick off with our first little round, which is what's changed? It's a reality check in registered apprenticeship. So starting off with Kyle, what feels different about registered apprenticeship today compared to even a year or two ago?
It's a great question. I think the nice thing about registered apprenticeship is that it fundamentally hasn't changed. I think what's really interesting is that we're seeing the ways in which employers interact with registered apprenticeship. That's really where a lot of the change has been. And my colleagues here will be able to speak to it from their perspectives. But one of the really interesting things, from my view, is I think, there's been this push towards different pathways into roles, particularly in tech, but in many different fields that are outside of the typical degree pathways. And I think it's been a pretty clouded landscape with MOOCs and stackable credentials and various industry recognized certifications and sort of the non-credit versions of all of those things that higher education has been developing. And it's really been hard to kind of understand, the validity or the efficacy of each of those. And that's hard for the not only the end user to know which ones to pursue from a learner standpoint, but also employers to really take those things on and kind of build a strategy around it to fill some of their gaps. And so I think the nice thing that we're seeing is because apprenticeship fundamentally hasn't changed, employers and really the marketplace in general are kind of coalescing around that as a model and the legitimacy of it, the standardization of it, all the benefits that it brings that I will let my colleagues speak to. Um, it's a good time, I think, from a momentum standpoint to really get behind apprenticeship now for those reasons.
Yeah, agreed. Steve, what are your thoughts?
Hi everyone. Glad to have you here. I want to kind of build on maybe something that Kyle said. I think one of the things that seems different from a few years ago is that this whole skill-based hiring thing has become way more prevalent. People are talking about it in a way that it just makes the conversation different because apprenticeship fits in that category specifically. So they're talking about, hey, that's what we're trying to do. Apprenticeship kind of fits in that. So it's changing the attitude of maybe apprenticeship being something unique and different and now being more focused on the skills themselves. One other thing, and I haven't, this may fit directly in with the skilled-based hiring, but it may also just fit in where the times are. But 3 years ago, the apprentices that we were having go through our program, about 15% of them were existing employees that were being upskilled inside their roles. And in the last year, that percentage was over 50%. Again, that might be a little bit that the people aren't bringing a lot more people into the equation, but that solution of upskilling their existing employees to fill their roles has definitely become way more prevalent and way more important in as far as organizations and their workforce management. So those are probably a couple things for me.
Yeah, good points. Andrea, I know you have a lot of good thoughts on this one.
Oh, yeah, I do. I have two thoughts on it. So the biggest shift that I see is the move away from the lone wolf mentality. So historically, employers would want to try to build everything from scratch. But really, the data is clear that when an employer goes it alone in registered apprenticeship, the likelihood of long-term success and persistence really drops significantly. And that's why I'm a huge proponent of multi-employer sponsored or group, also known as group models, is so vital now because it allows employers to implement faster and stay engaged longer because the infrastructure is shared. When with the tightening labor market and shift away from traditional degrees, it isn't just about a program anymore. It's a way to build apprenticeship directly into the company culture. And the second thing that I believe feels different about apprenticeship today is that employers are embracing the effectiveness of the learning model of apprenticeship itself. So that combination of related instruction with structured on-the-job training, not just bespoke instruction and now work, but the model of itself. And internally within Apprenti, we've introduced something called the Future Skills Institute, which represents a fundamental shift in delivery of RTI. It's directly aligned with on-the-job training. It's it's affordable for employers to contribute to, and it's consistent with the actual theory and technical skills that drive apprentice success. And the training doesn't have to be in a vacuum anymore. The instruction is mapped to what the apprentice is doing on the job, no matter what type of setting they're in anymore, like a high-tech data center, the shop floor of an advanced manufacturing facility, or even in an office setting.
Yeah, all true. And with that, what assumptions about apprenticeship are no longer true? And Steve, I'll kick this one over to you.
Yeah, I think something that is prevalent and still there, but that higher ed and apprenticeship are polar opposites. It's like you're gonna go to the college track, or you're maybe gonna do an apprenticeship track or something different as far as that goes. And though there is that, and there definitely that has a thing, those those lines are definitely crossing a lot more and have been becoming a little less polarized. Sorry for the terminology thing there. But so, for example, from day one, this hasn't been the case with what we've seen. Our
Mm.
actually average apprentice is 31 years old, so it's not that 18 to 22-year-old that people think it is. And most of them are often career changers, with a fair amount of them actually having college degrees, just not necessarily a degree in something that's consumable in the marketplace as well as maybe a tech degree could be. And so we've had a lot of those things happening. And the interesting thing about those people come with really great transferable skills and people like that and make those things occur. But, completely separate from that, higher ed and apprenticeship seem to be coming together with the idea that there's relevance for both.
Mm.
You could go and get a degree, but maybe you're not as job ready as an apprenticeship would make you be because the training for an apprenticeship is really specific to the job. And so we have a fair amount of organizations that are taking people that are maybe either in their degree at the time or they've just gotten a degree and putting them into an apprenticeship to give them the actual job ready on the job needs that they have to make that happen. It also becomes more a focus on the training for the workforce in general, kind of that continuous learning, that upskilling that we were talking about to make that happen. And I think higher ed is also looking at how they adopt apprenticeship models and programs as a way to stay in the game. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but I mean it in a scenario where how do they help these people that aren't getting college degrees? Well, for them, that's actually an opportunity to start reaching out to these people to actually have their programs train some of those things they need, which might make them go feel like they want to go on to get a degree later because they've now had experience in a higher ed that feels comfortable for those that are in that maybe that 18 to 25-year-old range. So it's becoming way more together and working to come solutions that make better sense for the employers of the world who don't really care sometimes about what that is. It's more about what can the person do, and hopefully more and more of that is becoming the case.
Good point. Andrea, what do you think about assumptions that are no longer true?
I think that is the assumption that employers have to do it themselves in order for it to be good or work well. In reality, collaborative models often produce better outcomes. I mean, that's just what's so anymore, in many cases. And I want to touch on something that Steve said that so while higher ed is starting to adopt models of apprenticeship, like Steve mentioned, they often struggle to adjust curriculum at the speed and focus that employers need. So the way that Apprenti has set up apprenticeship is to be consumable, making it easier for both the apprentice to learn and the employer to manage because they've got that background support from a multi-sponsored program like Apprenti. Um, Today, companies need a mix of talent pipelines, not just graduates and interns, and they need those pipelines to move, like I had said, about at the speed of business, not just the speed of the traditional semester. And so combining or shifting that model of the education model itself, I think is really a great opportunity for the future as we go on in apprenticeship. Uh, the other thing is that the assumption that apprenticeship is slow or clunky or only belongs in the building and construction trades is a thing of the past. It's not. It's not old. It's not slow or clunky anymore, even in the technical trades, like building and construction trades. There's so much technology in it.
It's very true. And Kyle, what are your thoughts on assumptions or things that are no longer true?
Yeah, this will build a little bit off of what Andrea just mentioned. I think given all the opportunity that we've talked about in the past couple of years, it's also allowed us to take a look in the mirror and reflect on our own version of the delivery of apprenticeship. And I know many of the guests that we have here today are familiar with Apprenti and know that, for the better part of a decade, we have a really robust set of things that we can provide to employer partners, and a way that is tried and true to deliver registered apprenticeship, to identify untapped talent, to put them in really strong opportunities with great employer partners, great related instruction. We also realized, though, throughout the course of the last several years, that we can be a bit more flexible, and it's allowed us to build in this sort of menu of services, or this creative set of options, all these things that we know that we can do really well, and really well in puzzle pieces effectively, and we can piece them together in a different manner depending on what we're hearing from our employer partners. So it's really focused our attention on being more consultative, sitting there with employer partners, really listening to their pain points, kind of understanding, like, it's not just a one size fits all model. And to the theme that both Steve and Andrea touched on, which is that it shouldn't feel burdensome. It's not this clunky, challenging thing to adopt, and it is really meaningfully beneficial to solving some of these crucial problems for our employer partners. And so I think looking internally and saying, like, how do we do this more efficiently? How do we get really good at a set of core things, but understand that we can piece them together differently to mean different things to different employers, and still uphold the integrity of the registered apprenticeship and the model that obviously means a great deal to us. That has been really, I think, groundbreaking for us internally and how we operate, and something I think that makes us all excited about where the future's going.
Yeah, I agree with all of you there. Moving on, I'm going to ask about what are we seeing on the ground? What's one hiring trend you're seeing that partners should be paying attention to? Steve, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think I kind of mentioned this before, that the upskilling of existing employers or employees seems to be something that's just there. And if one thinks about it, it's a really smart thing where a company's invested in someone, they're there, they like them. And most of the time, the companies will say, "Hey, I've got this college tuition reimbursement program, so go spend 4 or 5, 6, 7 years getting your degree. And by chance, if you get a degree and it might have a position inside our group, great, because then you can get that job." Well, with upskilling apprenticeships, it's like upskilling the employees through apprenticeship. It gives them an idea of a career path where it says, "I'm going to take these people, I'm going to skill them to this role." And they're going to not only be happy because they now have a way to actually stay inside the organization and develop, but they're seeing that they're being invested in. And so companies are really liking that idea and the consumption thereof. I
Mhm.
mentioned on my last answer a little bit about how some people are bringing on people and then they're putting them into apprenticeship. We have a client or two that are looking at them like, we're bringing on these people, but they maybe don't know AI. And AI is new. And so they're looking at how I take those people, put them immediately into an apprenticeship, as that's part of their upskilling process and their learning process to actually fill the needs of the role. And so that's one trend, somewhat similar, but a little bit different, that seems to be happening for sure.
Yeah. Kyle, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of good insights that we're getting from our partners in this ecosystem, but we continue to hear, you can look at it from the perspective of higher education or other types of training programs, continually saying, we're training these people, really cutting edge material, really strong programs, and they're struggling to find jobs. And we're hearing from employers that, they're aware of all of these programs and these pipelines, and even places that they've hired from historically in the past, there's either a volume issue, or maybe they're, finding that they still need to kind of retrain or train these individuals on their version of a particular role once they get within their walls. And so it's sort of that, two-sided problem where, the it feels like the talent pool is there and maybe well trained, and then employers are just struggling from the flip side of saying, like, the people that we need, or the specific skill sets we need, are hard to find. And so I think registered apprenticeship does a really good job of kind of pulling those stakeholders and those pieces together, and put some of the responsibility on both Apprenti and setting up programs and helping to oversee them, but also employers and really focusing on the development of people. And I think that model kind of, at least in part, to Andrea's point, it doesn't have to be the only thing, but another element of their hiring and development strategy being something that allows them to sort of take individuals with really high potential, great grit, problem solving, logic capabilities, and kind of molding them through this model to develop them into long term, really meaningful, impactful people within their workforce. Kind of solves some of those problems that both sides haven't figured out a way to kind of connect on necessarily.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree.
I agree because I think what we're seeing is a massive pivot from employers having a consumer of talent mindset to a developer mindset. And for a long time, companies were just talent consumers and they wanted to buy a finished product off the shelf in the form of a degreed applicant. But now there's a much greater openness to developing talent from within, and employers are realizing that they can't find the perfect fit, but they have the tools to build it. And so it becomes a shift from searching for that unicorn to actually building the stable. And at the end of the day, this way is creating a much more resilient workforce. And I want to add something to what something popped into my head as Steve was talking, that employers are already training their employees in, when they're bringing people in from colleges or interns even, there's still a training component that has to happen. And apprenticeship actually helps formalize that, not just slapping the title of apprenticeship on it, but also building in apprenticeship helps build in the structure for that employer and that way to train. And so I think that's another thing that um, partners should be paying attention to is thinking about that. Apprenticeship
Absolutely.
has a structure around it to something they're already doing.
Um, Shifting a little bit, still in the same vein, what's one challenge we're hearing repeatedly from employers or programs? And Kyle, I'd like to get your thoughts first.
Yeah, I mean, more along the same line. It's struggling with retention, struggling with the right fit. Finding, as Andrea said, sort of that unicorn that they're looking for to just come in and be immediately productive. I think it's a mindset shift to some degree.
Mm.
Another thing is sometimes there are degree requirements in place, and so really helping to set expectations that there are other ways to build and develop talent that will have meaningful impact for their organizations that allow them to kind of shift some of those ways of thinking. But really, the retention piece is a huge one, and when we are able to run programs in partnership with employer partners and really build strong pipelines and have them, see not only the impact of individual cohorts of apprentices, but that long-term retention, about 90% of those that complete these programs with us remain with their employers long term. That is a really important thing for organizations to understand and see for themselves, because I think that impact is huge. And part of the reason that some of these skills gap exist is because there is a lot of churn in the marketplace. There is a lot of turnover. There are people kind of jumping from company to company, oftentimes competitor to competitor, and so there's room for everything. There's room for the higher education talent pipeline. There's room for hiring experienced folks from within industry, within their ecosystem. There's room for other types of programs like visa initiatives and so forth. But apprenticeship has its place at the table, and I think more and more employers are seeing really it should be maybe towards the top of the list of that strategy because of the ability to build and help to retain talent in these critical areas.
Yeah, agreed. Steve, I'd like to get your thoughts from the business development lens of things. What's one challenge you're hearing repeatedly from employers or other programs?
Yeah, I think, kind of fits in a little bit with what Kyle was talking about, but the marketplace changes. I mean, things happen, and how do you keep people current in what's going on and have them ready to meet the needs that are occurring? And right now, AI, for example, is just changing our world like crazy. And the ability to have people that know AI and be able to do what they need to do, it's on one hand, people are going, well, AI is going to lose or is going to change and have me have so much less needs. So they're letting people go, but the people that they're keeping are not necessarily AI knowledgeable. So it's not like they really all of a sudden became proficient on that. So that's like one thing that's that's everyone can feel and understand today. But it's
Mhm.
always that the market's changing, needs change, people need to be continuously learning, and how do we address that to keep people retained and meeting our own needs?
I see a theme of retention building amongst this answer. Andrea, what's your
Yeah,
thoughts?
I was going to say, I'm going to build on that challenge of retention that Kyle mentioned. That I think that the reason it's so hard is that hiring has traditionally been so transactional, and rather than thinking about their talent as a valuable resource that they want to retain so that it is not as expensive. I mean, a lot of you on this call have probably, I love apprenticeship and I get super passionate about it. And I think a lot of you have heard me talk about how I believe apprenticeship is a backbone to a long-term talent strategy that, like what Steve's talking about when people are let go and the people they're keeping don't necessarily have the skills. Apprenticeship prepares people for not just the job for right now, but also the job of tomorrow. And by building this culture of, okay, wait, these are great employees that I want to keep for the long term. When they're laying people off, if your apprentice is trained to the greatest depth and breadth of knowledge and really embedded in the culture of the company, they're they're the ones that over 3, 5, 10 years, you still want to have that good backbone of talent that has been trained in all of those pieces. So I'll get off my soapbox, but I really think that that is shifting from transaction to more of, wait, if we want to be in business 5, 10 years from now, or even 30 years from now, what kind of technology and talent are we going to need to get there?
Yeah, good conversation. And Andrea, we love your passion for registered apprenticeship. And so I'm going to have you stay in your soapbox because this one's going to go directly to you. What's
Okay.
one thing that's working better than expected?
I think one thing that's working better than expected is using apprenticeship as a high level risk mitigation strategy. So I think employers are scared of moving away from degree-based hiring and that it feels risky to some leaders, but really apprenticeships provide immediate proof of skill. You
Mhm.
don't have to guess if someone can do the job. With the structure of apprenticeship, you're able to see in real time what the apprentice's progress is during their apprenticeship. And we're also seeing a huge payoff when companies invest in persistence and mentorship. And we kind of call this a retention first hiring perspective. So instead of trying to get butts and seats to solve their today's vacancy or job vacancy, the employers are hiring for the long term. And that's kind of what I was talking about, that long-term talent strategy and thinking about apprenticeship as that backbone of it. And so when they invest in the mentor and the apprentice relationship on day one, it pays for itself 10 times over in lower turnover and higher engagement, frankly.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to go to a quick poll. Let's see, which of these is most challenging right now? Hiring retention, internal buy-in, apprentice support, forgive me, scaling AI, or something else? Give you a few moments to think that one over. I see hiring. Hmm. Hiring, apprentice support, scaling, internal buy-in. That was what I was going to say. Was internal buy-in was what I personally see in my conversations.
Yeah, I'm not
I
sure
would
if you
like to,
can see the percent, but it's 58% of you
wow,
responded to that.
I would like to keep this snapshot. I think this could do good things for us as we move towards 2026 further. All right. So, with that, looking ahead, what's going to matter most in 2026? If partners only focus on one thing this year to strengthen apprenticeship, what would it be? Kyle, let's start with you.
This will seem overly simplistic, but my advice would just be to try it. It's a real solution to critical problems, and I don't think organizations should let this, you know, goal of perfection in these types of programs that they're not necessarily comfortable with get in the way of doing something that could have meaningful, almost immediate impact for their organizations. And when you launch a program, that's your opportunity to learn and really figure out what works, what doesn't, evolve that program and kind of build it in as a long-term strategy. And the reality is, Apprenti or any other peer type organization in the marketplace, we're all here to support organizations in kind of pulling some of that burden off of them, help to empower them to understand how to put the infrastructure in place to really support strong apprenticeships. But more than anything, just drive towards the outcomes that they're seeking. And I think organizations consistently find that we take a lot of that lift or what they think will be this really burdensome thing in taking on a program that they're not typically used to, at least they're learning about it. Um, that partnership piece can't be overlooked. And so I would just say, try it, lean on partners like Apprenti, ask questions, and let us help you put something in place sooner than later so you can start to solve some of these problems for the long term and really build a continually improving workforce.
Agreed. And I will give a plug. I think your team does a fantastic job when it comes to managing programs and helping employers through it that are trying it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Andrea, what do successful programs have in common heading into 2026?
I think successful programs use a multi-employer sponsored program instead of doing it themselves, really using a group sponsor to leverage infrastructure and funding.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there. Steve, what are your thoughts on that?
You know, companies that don't treat apprenticeship as a special project, right
Mm.
now there's a lot of companies will say, "Oh, I'm going to bring on an apprentice this year," which is great. I'm not downplaying that. But if it becomes the hiring solution and aligns with things that you're already doing, it just becomes a way that you can hire and build upon that. Some of the biggest and most we're seeing the biggest push and the largest growth in apprenticeship is with organizations that are thinking of this is how I bring people on is through this program. The title, they don't get lost in the title. They get more focused on this is how I train, this is how I retain, and no matter where they are in the process when they come to us, this can work and this will be perfect for that. So that's the thing that probably I would recommend. Don't treat it as a special project.
Absolutely. Everybody learns from each other that way. I think we have an image we want to share. This comes from our website, so don't feel like you have to hurry and take a snapshot. It is on our website. You are able to find it. We will make sure that that's dropped. Thank you, Emily, for dropping that in the chat. But just to give you how the strategy works and the difference between apprenticeship and internship. I think this is very, very helpful for everyone on the call. While everyone's taking a quick peek at that and clicking the link to save it, Andrea, what's one opportunity people might be underestimating?
Hmm. Well, using apprenticeship as a tool for existing staff. They, I think, are underestimating the power of that. And especially now that agentic AI and clean energy infrastructure, for example, is really hot. Lots of companies have existing staff whose roles are being displaced, but instead of laying off that existing staff and hiring new apprentices, using apprenticeship to transition them into high demand roles, like, for example, AI data analysts or something, is, I think, a great way to do it. Or banks changing from or moving from a legacy system into some of the newer technology and newer systems. The thing about these employees that they might be laying off and our existing staff is that they've already shown their culture fit. They've shown their reliability and their
Yeah,
institutional knowledge, which take a really long time to develop. I mean, really. And apprenticeship provides the technical skills that they need to stay relevant. And so you don't have to fill in with training people in your culture, your technology, and institutional knowledge. So I think don't underestimate apprenticeship as an extremely effective tool for upskilling.
agreed. Steve, what are your thoughts on an opportunity people might be underestimating?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to do a plus one on what Andrea just said. The career pathing of existing employees is just the value of that is just immense. But I will add one more, the idea of just um, trying to look at some group of people that you bring in and looking at how this can be the pathway that you train and make sure everyone is at the same point. So having this be the solution for making sure everyone's up to where you need them to be and learning the same things. And AI is one of those examples that could be used for that.
Agreed. Kyle, when you want to give us some final thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, obviously going to plus one what they both said and maybe just clarify one thing a little bit further. I think, that there's this difference between reskilling or upskilling that, certain organizations really like to make a distinction between. It's as Andrea described, there's so many useful ways, with the pace of change in tech and the evolution of certain roles and job families,
Mhm.
whether it is a displacement or someone who gets converted into a modernized version of that role through apprenticeship, that is an awesome use for registered apprenticeship. But there's also this thought of, maybe organizations have critical skills gaps in certain areas of their workforce, but maybe they're perfectly good or have a surplus and maybe some non-technical roles. This concept of a baggage handler becoming a cybersecurity analyst, looking internally, maybe they don't have the capability of adding headcount, but they could afford to pull from some group within their organization where they have a good pipeline and they will be able to consistently fill those roles in the future and put them into an apprenticeship program and fill a critical gap within their workforce. That is an equally meaningful way to utilize registered apprenticeship that sometimes organizations they think of it one way or another when we talk about incumbent talent development, but I think there's many different ways to look at that, and I think it's really important to focus conversations around apprenticeship in 2026 around that sort of thing, and then just the upskilling or reskilling in general.
Very good thoughts. Thank you, all of you, for your insight on what we can expect in 2026 and myths debunking and just looking forward. I'd like to open the floor now for some community Q&A. We want to hear what's actually happening in your world. No question is too granular, too big. Whether you have a success story you want to share or a problem you're stuck on, the floor is yours. We're happy to unmute you so you can ask your question, or if you want to ask it in chat. So I'd like to ask who wants to kick us off with our first question. We have some hands raised.
Chris, you can unmute.
Hey, thank you very much for hosting this. And my quick question would be kind of more of in response to some of the news this morning that some of the techs like Amazon and Microsoft have announced, here in Washington State, nearly 10% layoff due to rescaling their workforce for in-person remote to what they assume will be not the need for as much actual physical person-to-person contact and leaning in on what I assume would be the AI inclusion into how they're structuring their business going forward. Hats off to Apprenti for addressing upscaling existing employees and helping retool them. Is there, without violating any NDAs, is there a move to try to reach out to some of those groups like Amazon and Microsoft and what have you to talk about upscaling their existing workforce rather than displacing them?
Good question.
I'll take that. I think the answer is uh, we're talking to people all the time. I think the reality of an Amazon making that announcement is probably not going to change their outcomes at this point in time. But we are singing the song in the first place to maybe an organization like Amazon that this could be a better solution than just going and making that happen. I we function, our employers kind of drive us, and we try to drive the message with them. But I hate to see that kind of thing because it indicates that there's not someplace else inside that can be the case. And and no judgment specifically on the Microsoft and Amazon announcements, but I do think there's been a little bit of um, using AI as an excuse for people to right size over hiring that they maybe have done in the past, and hopefully that's not really what's going on here, and them just using that as an excuse too.
Thank you. I appreciate that. In the same comment, UPS announced that they're closing one of the Eastern Washington locations, in the assumption that they will have less or will be doing less delivery of packages for one of the online groups. So, if I'm correct, I thought the businesses that had well over a number of employees had to give out a warn notice before any mass layoffs. And I'm assuming that's what that was this morning, was a public acknowledgement. It'd be great for anybody going back on the other hill to, or meeting with some of these tech moguls and giants to say, hey, prior to considering a warn notice to employees, working with departments of employment security and they've got to host and spend a little bit of their capital towards the relocation, retraining of existing employees, leaning in on the apprentice apprenticeship model for upskilling or retooling or better preparing workers for entering an ever moving, changing workforce, to try to meet some of our internal needs. I just just a thought.
I love the suggestion. Thank you for sharing that, and I'll be talking to my team about that.
All right, I believe we have Kara up next.
And you should be able to go, Kara.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yes, I have a quick question. So we are looking at rolling out an apprenticeship, and we'd like to do it in the format that would be broadly applicable across the nation. However, when we've talked to our local state provider, as well as our national representative, we have been advised that local resources are more available, and that they recommended going after a state-specific apprenticeship, um, at least first. Um, and, and then from there going to state. Is is that what you all would recommend as well? If our goal, I mean, because I did hear you also mention like having maybe multiple sponsors to build out apprenticeships, and that maybe that's a way to bridge that gap as well.
How about I jump in on that one? Kara, is it Kara or Kara?
Kara, thank you.
Kara, okay, great. Thanks, Kara. In chat, Emily put in this one pager that we put together that compares independent versus multi-employer sponsored registered apprenticeship programs that can help kind of Mm, well, it outlines the differences between the two, and one isn't necessarily better than the others. However, it is I want to take a moment to just kind of describe a multi-employer sponsored program and what I'm talking about with that. Multi-employer sponsored programs mean that there is one organization that sponsors those apprenticeship standards. So they do the heavy lift of setting up the program with the state or federal agency. They complete and maintain the required paperwork. They work with all of the employers that are part of their program to develop standards with new occupations. Uh, Multi-employer sponsored programs that one organization, they help arrange related instruction. They help track and manage apprentice progress with that employer to take that heavy burden off the employer so they can focus on what they do best, which is run their companies and train their people to their processes, equipment, software, and their culture. A group sponsored program, multi-employer sponsored program, means that that one sponsor, that one organization, for example, like Apprenti, um, goes out and says, okay, employer, if you would like to do apprenticeship and you want to get started very quickly, you want to have minimal time for setup and onboarding, you want to reduce your administrative burden, lower your initial investment, minimize what internal staffing needs to administer a program. You could become part of the Apprenti apprenticeship to use our shared resources, to use our infrastructure, to manage apprentices, to keep track of those types of things. Also to Apprenti handles the compliance aspects of it with the state and federal agencies. We can help access talent pools for untapped groups that you haven't reached before. And then also group sponsors are able to go to state or local agencies and the federal agencies and say, okay, we've got this group of 300 employers and we are looking for funding that can help offset or reduce the costs for that employer to participate in registered apprenticeship. So then it becomes a pass through to that employer to offset the cost that an employer might be investing, like, for example, in training costs. So having one group, it helps so employers don't have to do the onesie twosies and go do it themselves.
Yeah, and Karen, one more thing. I think sometimes when we look at companies that have operations in multiple locations and they want to have one program that fits across the United States, we if we already have a program that, like what Andrea was saying, they could utilize that standard, so it'd be the same standard throughout, or we could help you create one that's the same without. And then by chance, because of funding that might exist in a state, and we might file also at the state level to get access to that funding, but everything will get managed the same and the apprenticeships would basically be exactly the same across the way. It's just in that case, we can help do both the state filings if needed and also can look at the national stuff for the things that would be associated with that.
And I want to throw out there, Apprenti isn't the only multi-employer
Correct.
sponsored program out there. We happen to be one of many, and there's plenty of room in the sandbox. We've got a bunch of partners on the call right now that have their own multi-employer sponsored programs in their specific states. Like, for example, 40 by 80 in Pennsylvania, amazing program, or PACT in Pennsylvania on the Philadelphia side. They have their finger on the pulse of what kind of local funding is available and help take the administrative burden out of the mix for the employer to make it so much faster and easier for an employer to just get started, find people who they can start developing internally.
Okay, thank you.
Great questions. Anybody else have any questions? Go ahead and raise your hand or thoughts.
And I want to check, did that answer your question or just create more questions for you?
Yeah, no, it gives me a better understanding of what you guys do. I've been in talks a little bit with Carla and Daniel, so we kind of have a unique situation where we've been asked to build out this blueprint, and so we do have one company that we're working with specifically already, but we know we probably or we're going to be building connections across state lines. And so basically, I know I need to reach out to you guys again.
Great. Happy to help.
Thanks.
I see
Victor.
Victor. You should be able to talk now.
Well, hello, how are you?
Doing
you hear
great.
me?
How are you? Yes.
All right. Well, what are the biggest barriers in getting the word out to all these great things that we're hearing about, sometimes for the first time? It's great to know this is here. So, what can we do to help make this more known, and get folks, first of all, the students, uh, who, like you said, sometimes we're at companies who are upgrading their skills, the companies learning about the programs. It's kind of a great opportunity that should be, promoted a bit more. What can be
I
done to
agree.
help support getting the word out?
Well,
Who wants to take it?
we could probably take it from a couple different angles, but from the word out to the prospective apprentice or the learner side of things, I'd be happy to follow up after this and have a discussion about how we can co-promote, um, you know, engaging with apprentice, gaining eligibility to pursue apprenticeships through us with any number of our employer partners, and even on behalf of our employer partners, at times we go and we will conduct partnered screenings and things on a regional basis, depending on the needs. And so there's probably a lot of stuff to do there from promotion on the learner side. And a member of my team is really involved with sort of building that national network of partners and helping to maintain our strong group of eligible candidates. Um, and I'm sure my colleagues here have some perspectives on that from more of the employer partner side. But equally a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah, I think on the employer side, just having anybody who uh, Kyle's team is the right team for getting individuals who are interested in apprenticeships. If by chance you had customers or clients that you work with from your side and they want to learn more about how this might work for them and taking on your students in a more direct way or a more trained and direct way, sorry. Happy to talk to you also about that and what we could do to make that happen.
Yeah.
Great program.
Thank you. All right, since we're about 5 minutes out, I want to pose one last question, and this is for our state leaders. We often see a honeymoon phase with new apprenticeships where we're losing companies in the process. And what is the biggest reason they decide to not renew for a second cohort of apprentices? Feel free to raise your hand if you mull that one over for a moment.
And I don't have a poll for this one. So this one will be just drop in the chat, raise your hand,
great.
whoever you're most comfortable.
If you have a poll, Emily, I think that's a great
I have
place.
to make it. I didn't make
Oh.
this one. I'm sorry.
Okay. That's okay.
Good one, Chuck. Different agendas, ROI, thoughts between field level leaders and higher leaders.
Great one. Thank you, Chuck.
Natalie, change in company leadership and managers who have supported the program, which goes to Steve's comment about it's not a special program, it is a workforce development tool, and strategy. This is great. All right. Well, I would like to thank you all again for not only attending, but for your participation today, engaging, giving us great conversation. All of our community practices will be building upon each other, and we host these quarterly. So please keep a pulse on our newsletter, and we will always send out the invitation. And we would welcome you to attend all of our future community of practices. To our leaders that joined today, thank you for your time. I greatly appreciate your support. And as we close out, what's one sentence that we can give as a takeaway, or one person to summarize?
Kyle.
I mean, I was just actually typing something in the chat personally.
Me too.
For me, this ecosystem here, all of you being present and engaging with us either over the course of years or just learning about us and taking an interest in apprenticeship in our work, that's all really deeply meaningful to us. We don't do this alone. We have a great organization, a great mission, a great staff, but our partners, our network of partners, is really where we extend our reach and make the biggest impact. And ultimately, it's about providing opportunity for both individuals and employers to make meaningful change, within both their lives and their workforce. This model does a lot, but it's people like you, it's organizations like where you come from, and your interest in this that are going to really take this to the scale that it needs to be at. So, probably more than a couple sentences, but it means a lot to hear, and we look forward to continuing to engage.
Thank you, Kyle. Really appreciate that. Well, thank you all again for attending and for communicating with us today and participating. And we truly look forward to working with you in 2026. And we'll see you next time. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.